Good evening from New York City, sort of. I'm Jay Kaplan alongside Stephen Rabinowitz. Tonight, well, actually today, considering it's Saturday, we've got a New York quarterback trading Jets green for Panthers black and blue. The Mets getting a win from a black and blue, and a college basketball blue blood getting some new blood on the sidelines. We'll also look at whether MLB instant replay should be expanded and tell you what from this year's NCAA tournament should be kept going forward. You're watching the Cold Takes edition of On the Sports Lines. Rabbi, start us off.
First of all, I missed your writing, not because I actually missed your writing, because I actually didn't see it. Also, I love how people say it's tonight when it's like 11 a.m. in the morning when we're taping this. So good morning, anybody who's watching live on Facebook. All right, Jay. Last show we did was so long ago. Sam Darnold was actually still a member of the Jets.
That's right.
Spoiler alert. He's not now. On April the 5th, the former leader of the JEINTS was traded to Carolina for a 6th rounder this year and a 2nd and a 4th rounder next year. And if you saw Sam Darnold's reaction on social media, he's not too broken up about it. Haven't seen anybody celebrate a release more than Antonio Brown, pretty much. But enough about the emotions of actual people, because that's not what we're here to do on this show. We're here to talk about the organization's impact of this trade. I'll talk about the Panthers portion of this in a minute, but Jay, let's talk about Gang Green and their future.
I can't honestly say I'm surprised by this deal. I mean, especially once things leaked out about the Jets and how high they are on BYU quarterback Zach Wilson. If he's not taken when the Jets pick at number 2 in 2 weeks, the entire pro football community will be shocked, including us. This trade had to be made for both the Jets and for Sam Darnold. If ever someone needed to change his scenery, it's Darnold. And if ever a team needed a fresh start at quarterback, it's the Jets. The return on the trade for New York is better than I expected, Rabbi. Nobody foresaw the Panthers giving the Jets 3 picks over the next 2 drafts in exchange for a quarterback with this many questions about his game. I mean, think about it. The Eagles got a 3rd rounder and a conditional 2nd rounder that could turn into a 1st rounder for Carson Wentz. The Lions got a pair of 1st-round picks and a 3rd-round pick for Matt Stafford. With Darnold finishing dead last out of 33 quarterbacks in quarterback rating last year, no one thought the Jets would get a return even this close. I mean, getting a better return from those signal callers, who saw that coming? Look, I've said this on the show pretty much every time we talked about the Jets this past season. The Jets failed Darnold as much as he failed them, maybe more so when you consider the horrifically awful offensive scheme that Darnold was forced to play in under Adam Gase, and the fact that they never really gave him a legit offensive line to protect him or legit playmakers for him to get the ball to. When you look back on his time here, the Jets got some hope from the final 6 games of Darnold's rookie season. Completed 64% of his passes, 900-plus yards, 6 TDs against 1 pick for a passer rating of 99.1. He was matching the likes of Aaron Rodgers and Deshaun Watson throw in that period. Then they fired Todd Bowles and his staff and replaced him with Adam Gase and company, and then the hope gradually turned to despair. Darnold showed some improvement in his 2nd season, a little under 62% completion, 3,000-plus yards, 19 TDs against only 3 interceptions. Acceptable 84-plus passer rating in 13 games in his 1st season under Gates. Not bad, but below the level of those final 6 games of his rookie year, which everyone, including us, chalked up to the 3 weeks that he missed with mono after game 1. Then came the unmitigated disaster that was 2020. We all know the numbers. He went 2-10 as a starter, threw for just 2,208 yards, had only 9 touchdowns against 11 interceptions. His completion percentage was under 60%. He had an NFL worst passer rating of 72.7, 0 300-yard games, 8 games where he threw for less than 200 yards, 5 games without a touchdown pass. His mechanics and footwork were a mess. His decision-making was beyond awful. He seemed to have forgotten how to read defenses. The regression from those final 6 games of the rookie season to where he ended up this past season was egregious. And to add insult to injury, he missed time twice due to a recurring shoulder problem. As Gase said about his embattled quarterback in December, quote, "I came here to help him develop his career, and we haven't been able to do that. I haven't done a good enough job," end quote. You think? On the show, after Robert Saleh was hired as the new Jets head coach, I spoke at length about the quote-unquote Shanahan family offensive scheme that Gang Green would run under new offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur, and how Darnold would be successful playing at it. I felt that he could have possibly given the Jets a, quote, Jimmy G at his best type of quarterback, which might have been enough with the other improvements and upgrades around him and on the other side of the ball to move the needle forward on the Jets' development as a team and Darnold's development as a quarterback. It would have been interesting to see what the new coaching staff and the new offense would have done for Darnold and he for them. But like I said at the top, Rabbi, I'm not surprised that the 2018 number 3 overall pick out of USC will have to go somewhere else to try and resurrect his career. No one at the Jets facility has anything but good things to say about Darnold as a person and a player, and they all feel bad that it didn't work out. I do too. Rabbi, here's hoping that Matt Rule and Joe Brady can undo all the damage Adam Gase did and turn Darnold into a solid NFL quarterback.
Can I focus on the Jets angle and kind of retort you before we move on to the Panthers angle?
It wouldn't be us doing the show without you retorting me.
No, I have to, because I think it's legally abound. But I think one thing that if Sam had stayed in New York, one thing we haven't really seen that he's gotten is competition. He got really the starting job handed to him from day one, and he never has really had pressure towards
every guy brought into camp was brought in to be that veteran backup, to be a mentor type, or you're just the emergency.
You're not going to see the ghost of Joe Flacco beating out Sam Darnold for a job at the beginning of the season. So that's what I would have rather liked to see on the New York Jets side. But flipping over to the Panthers side, there's two things that you have to be concerned about. I think Sam Darnold is a good fit for a Panther offense that has emerging wide receivers. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be a big help.
McCaffrey at running back.
Yes. I mean, you still have to get a full healthy. I want to see a healthy season of Christian McCaffrey, because last season was just almost an abomination. But when you have Christian McCaffrey, you have a top 5 running back easily.
That's
right.
Running back.
But as we know, running backs don't really change the game too much. And even though McCaffrey has moved the needle for Carolina, they've only really gotten to one wild card with him in the backfield. So
true enough.
That's something to keep an eye on. But I don't know what's going to happen with Darnold's backup or competition. Yes, he's 23. Yes, they traded 3 picks for him, but I think there's still one more move that Carolina needs to be made. When we do our draft show on Thursday, April 29th, I think we're going to see what Carolina's path is. They have the number 8 pick. There have been talks that Justin Fields, if he's not picked up at number 3 or number 4 by San Francisco and Atlanta respectively, and right now that doesn't seem to be the case.
No.
The next team down would be number 8 with Carolina, and I think Justin Fields might be the right choice for that team and to kind of give competition, because you need a quarterback and you're going to want the one that brings you to the highest high. Because as we know,
so you're telling me Teddy Bridgewater is not going to supply any
Teddy Bridgewater. Well, we'll talk about Teddy Bridgewater in a second. But if you get Justin Fields, that's going to give Sam Darnold competition. And I think competition will bring the best out of Sam Darnold, because last year we saw him just not improving at all. And that's not just Adam Gase's fault. Sam was just not willing to kind of change a lot of his motions. And I think he all of a sudden got in his head once he threw his first interception. If you ever saw that Indianapolis Colts game last year, the first pick 6 turned into a second interception and third interception. It was his worst game as a pro. Now, on to Teddy Bridgewater, a guy who got a friendly deal last offseason from Carolina for 3 years, $45 million. Him and Matt Rule just never mixed in the same offense, which is why Carolina is moving on this quickly. I'm very interested to see. Teddy Bridgewater is going to probably be a backup somewhere in the league, and I'm curious to see what Carolina gets in return for him. Now, I understand, again, with all of the picks that Carolina gave the Jets, this is obviously Sam Darnold's team. I don't know if it is. I think there's going to be some insurance given to make sure that the right fit is there for Carolina. This is going to be a very interesting offseason for the Panthers. They're really, in my opinion, they're easily team number 4 in that division. Even with Drew Brees retiring, you have the Bucs, who just won a Super Bowl, and Tom Brady is still playing at an elite level. You have all the weapons in the world with the Saints. They just need to find the quarterback, and I think they'll at least be a 9 to 10 win team with Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill. And the Falcons are going to have the number 4 pick, so they're either going to have a new, fresh start at quarterback with someone like Trey Lance again. We'll talk about that in our draft show on April 29th. Yep. But they could also pick up someone like Kyle Pitts, who is one of the best tight end prospects ever to come out. And then you have Atlanta, who is ahead of you. So I think what Carolina needs to do is just find the right quarterback for the future. Remember, Darnold is a baby. He is 23, 24 years old. I think he's 23.
23. He won't turn 24 until the next.
So you have, if he plays at a Jimmy Garoppolo circa 2019 type level and not any other years after that, you have 4 to 5 years of prosperity and you might have your quarterback for the future. But we won't know that until August.
I'll tell you, Rabbi, the one thing that he's got to be liking, I mean, other than the fact that, they run a very quarterback friendly offense in Carolina, is that he gets reunited with Robbie Anderson, who is a guy he loved throwing to in New York. And that's a move that letting Anderson get away is a move I know the Jets organization, even if they won't say it publicly, they're probably regretting. It'll be nice to see how those guys reconnect chemistry wise, because they produced some pretty big plays when they were both in New York.
Robbie Anderson, anybody would like to have Robbie Anderson. That man is a deep threat machine. All right, let's move on to the boys.
Yep,
let's move on to
the. I'm still not.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. I'm still not ready to get on a number 7 train. So let's take my car across the Whitestone Bridge and make our way to Citi Field. In their home opener back on April 8th, the boys of Flushing were in a tie game against the Miami Marlins as they came to bat in the bottom of the ninth. With one out and the bases loaded, right fielder Michael Conforto stepped to the plate to face Marlins reliever Anthony Bass. Conforto worked the count full, and as the payoff pitch came through the strike zone, it appeared to hit him on the right elbow. The ump gave him first base on the hit by pitch, and the winning run crossed the plate. Rabbi, doesn't the rule book say that if a pitch is ruled a strike, the batter cannot be awarded first on a hit by pitch? I believe that's true.
Not if the umpire is blind and the replay is making it blinder.
But here's the thing. You can't review balls and strikes. So the only thing the umps could review is if Conforto got hit or not, and they ruled that he did. Rabbi, you add this grand larceny to the apparent blown call at the plate in the Braves-Phillies game that cost Atlanta the game. And what are you ready to change about ML Instant Replay right now?
Okay, so first of all, let's talk first about the cases are completely different. The Mets-Marlins case is the fact that you can't review that play, and Conforto, who did something that he claimed was instinct, which I completely understand, and that's the reason why he leaned in, but very illegal. The Braves-Phillies situation was one where they had a chance to replay it. They took 5 minutes. They had as many angles as possible. It was confusing enough that the play-by-play man for that game, Matt Vasgersian, said, "I think he's safe," when in reality, he clearly wasn't to everybody with 2 eyes. And that's the reason why that larceny happened the way they did. By the way, both NL East games, ironically enough. You know what? I think we should replay everything. I think the NFL is kind of leaning towards that route, unfortunately. And I know people are always saying, well, you're going to make the game longer. No, I think if you want to do it in this situation, we keep the challenges the way it is, and in the 7th inning, we replay everything on, because that's when the game is decided. And honestly, you should use your judgment on what needs to be replayed. I think the NBA itself has gotten way too out of hand, because they'll review a clear path foul with one team up 24. That's not really the way that this works. And I don't trust umpires to use their own eyes, because you know what, as somebody who has an attention deficit disorder, could you tell when I would do these shows? I think that you're going to miss a thing from time or two. The human eye can only do so much. Sure, we pay these umps a decent amount, and I think we want to make sure they get everything right on first try, but I don't want to be like Sean Roman and say, let's eliminate replay altogether and enjoy the spirit of the game. Now, the spirit of the game has changed, and I think I need replay. I want replay for everything. I want to replay for those critical moments of the game that could change a game one way or the other. I think we're going to see more instances like this. And if that's the case, why have instant replay at all if you're not going to use it in all situations? One other thing too, I need every angle of this.
Yeah, 100%.
Use a home plate angle. Use a GoPro, use every single thing that you possibly can to make sure you can see the plate at its most magnified view. I know there's this thing called money that would need to be in that would need to help in this situation, but I want to make sure that we get everything right. And sure, replay has been, again, overused in a lot of situations, but you know what? It needs to be the way of the world that everything can be reviewed.
Yeah, I hear you. And I'm about to go on a rant here. So,
What? You never go on a rant. This is a first.
It's
Take your
surprising.
pictures, guys.
But
Take
this is what happens when we do the show on a Saturday morning and I haven't had coffee yet. So where do I start here? Both Conforto's hit by pitch and the plate-to-plate in the Braves Phillies game are really bad looks for the home plate umpire in each game. And it gives the pro instant replay crowd, like my partner here, just two more reasons to say that replay needs to be greatly expanded and maybe in any and all the ways you just talked about. The way I see it, Conforto's hit by pitch technically didn't even need to go to replay to determine if he was hit by the pitch or not because the pitch was in the strike zone, which by the rule book automatically makes that hit by pitch irrelevant. The pitch should have been called the strike. Conforto should have been the second out of the inning. Home plate umpire Ron Copa initially called the pitch a strike before acknowledging that the ball had grazed Conforto's elbow. It should have ended there because, as Culpa said after the game, quote, "The guy was hit by the pitch in the strike zone. I should have called him out. That's it. I mean, that's the way it went down. There's nothing more to it than that." End quote. The fact that replay review only allows the umpires to check whether the ball hit Conforto and whether or not it would have been a strike is stupid. Isn't it supposed to be all about getting the call correct? That said, why couldn't the rest of the umpiring crew had a discussion, ask Culpa if he thought the pitch was a strike, and if he said yes, call Conforto out because the damn rule book says he's out. As for the plate in the Braves Phillies game, that one just makes me shake my head. The initial call by home plate umpire Lance Barrett was that Phillies third baseman Alec Boehm had touched the plate ahead of the throw by left fielder Marcell Ozuna and the tag by catcher Travis d'Arnaud. Replay appeared to show that Boehm may have missed the plate. The play was reviewed by the replay crew in New York after Braves manager Brian Snitker challenged it and the call was upheld. Even though, according to Snitker, multiple camera views showed that Boehm's foot was at least a few inches above the plate and he never actually touched it. Barrett didn't offer Snitker an explanation when he came out of the dugout to angrily question the call being upheld by the replay crew in New York. Snitker said that managers are never given an explanation in these situations, which irks managers and players alike. MLB said in a statement that after a review of all relevant angles, the replay official could not definitively determine that the Phillies' Alec Boehm failed to touch home plate before Braves catcher Travis d'Arnaud tagged him. Therefore, the call stands as is. The runner is safe. But I've never understood this thing umpires have about not wanting to overrule their brethren on a call. In the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, if someone has a better view or knows that the call is against the rules, they get together, they discuss it, they make sure they have it right, then they let everyone know the outcome of the play. If the point of replay is to ultimately get the call correct, then the replay official should have the mandate to not only call down to the field and say they're reviewing a previous play due to the closeness of the call, they should have the wherewithal and the latitude to determine the correct outcome regardless of how the play was called on the field. I know people like our Sean Roman hate that baseball has any instant replay and never wanted it in the game in any shape, manner, or form. Sean is a purist, so I understand where he's coming from. But this genie has been out of the bottle for a while and it's not going back in. So the impetus should be on MLB and the umpiring crews to get the calls right. All the calls. They need to do it better, Rabbi.
One thing that I think would help, and I think this will help with all sports, if something is going on into a replay, and I know this is never going to happen, one thing that people always do is, oh, this was called in. There's not overwhelming evidence that it's actually out. Here's something I would do. If a replay is initiated in any sport, treat it like it's a fresh play. Treat it like if it's out, if you think it's out, even if it's by a small fraction of a doubt, it's out. If you think it's in, even by a small fraction, if you think it's safe, even by a small fraction, it's safe. If you do that, you can actually kind of solve this problem a little bit because you can look at the play. Because I don't know when explanation for that play, the play was ever given, but I think the one thing would be like, oh, there's a little doubt that the foot may have possibly 1% grazed the base. And then by letter of the law, that means safe because the initial ruling was safe. Let's take away the initial ruling of the umpires because let's face it, the umpires really suck in some situations. Like if you ever have a certain umpire, you're looking, I'm like,
Joe West
oh crap, I'm best. That's Joe West was his other example. Angel Hernandez
was
is
the
a
next one to
huge
come to mind.
example
Yes.
from the past. So if we do that, maybe we solve world peace. Maybe we solve a lot of the issues that are really overcoming baseball. And like I said, not everything in the first and second innings needs to be reviewed. But when we get into crunch time, that's when you need to get the ruling right. What I think it was the great philosopher Chris Russo that said you should that a play in the seventh inning or later is more important than a play in the sixth inning or before. I've never agreed with that rule, but you know what? Got a little bit of a point there.
Yeah, all right. Either way, they got to do it better.
Let's stop bashing umpires as much as I'd love to bash umpires all day. We can actually do a marathon on people who make bad judgments. And let's talk about what we talked about last show. We talked about the sudden retirement of now former UNC basketball coach Roy Williams, which happened on our last show day, which was April 1st, believe it or not. So April Fools, we're actually doing a Saturday show. Just days later, though, they hired Hubert Davis, one of the many assistant coaches under Williams as its next head coach. So, like the show that we've done for over a year now, UNC, like always, stays at home. Let's go to our resident Tar Heel fan with his reaction on this hire.
Let me say this at the start that I wholeheartedly applaud UNC for making Hubert Davis the next men's basketball head coach in Chapel Hill. Do I think that Roy Williams had something to do with Davis getting the nod in a way similar to Dean Smith having something to do with Bill Guthridge, his longtime number 2, ascending to the first chair when Smith retired? Yeah, maybe. It wouldn't surprise me, especially since UNC athletic director Bubba Cunningham said that Williams would be involved in finding his successor. But I have zero problem with the job staying within the family. Davis, first black head coach in UNC history, has connections to multiple generations of Tar Heels, including Charlie Scott, who was the first black scholarship athlete to ever play at North Carolina when Dean Smith recruited him to Chapel Hill back in 1967. Davis has a high basketball IQ, and he has the kind of personality that's able to handle the scrutiny of this high-profile job. Cunningham hired Davis for the same reason Coach Smith brought in Scott. Each was the best and right man for the job. Davis's hiring also showcases some nice trends in the sport, more top jobs going to up-and-coming assistants and more of those positions being filled by black coaches. It's a nice change from the seemingly every new job opening going to a guy who failed as a head coach somewhere else. I wholeheartedly agree with Dana O'Neill, who's the senior college basketball writer at The Athletic, that the sport could use some new blood. The fact that the only place Davis has ever wanted to be a head coach was at North Carolina mattered in his hiring. The fact that he spent 13 total years on campus, 4 as a player and then 9 as an assistant coach after his NBA career ended, mean he truly gets it about what being part of this program is all about. That matters when you're roaming the sidelines of a court that bears your mentor's name in a building that bears his mentor's name. All that aside, Davis has some very real challenges at UNC. While the return of guard Caleb Love is a plus, the loss of 3 of the team's regular 4 big men from this past year's rotation is a void that will be tough to fill. Daron Sharp is NBA bound. Walker Kessler is transferring to Auburn, and Garrison Brooks is taking advantage of his super senior year at Mississippi State. Throw in backup big man Sterling Manley and also entering the transfer portal, and that leaves, for now at least, Armando Bacot is the only true big man on the roster, but even he's testing the NBA draft waters, so it's not a lock that he'll be back. In a way, this could be a good thing, as many people in and around the game have felt that North Carolina's 2 big men secondary break offensive scheme was out of step with the way the game has changed over the last 2 years. Davis, however, said in his introductory press conference, quote, that he had no plans of going away from that foundation because I believe in it, end quote. But come on, guys, what else is he supposed to say? UNC's offense is built around what the point guard does and the roles of the 2 big men. One acts as the rim runner on the break, while the other acts as the trailer and has 3 options. Shoot from the free throw line extended area, drive to the basket, or connect with his partner on high-low passing. The conventional 2-guard and small forward, at least in UNC's offense, are basically the same. They go to the corners, provide options for kickouts on the initial break. But when you only have 1 big, how do you adjust that offensive scheme? Who Davis and his still to be fleshed out coaching staff, right now Sean Mays, the only official assistant on board. Who they recruit and bring in via the transfer portal will largely dictate what style of this basketball this team plays come the fall. And there's not a lot of traditional UNC type bigs in the transfer portal for Davis to try and bring in. Former Virginia forward Justin McCoy, who North Carolina recruited out of high school, will be wearing Tar Heel blue this fall. But at 6'8", 215, he's more of a combo forward, is more likely to see the bulk of his playing time on the perimeter as opposed to in the paint, though he has shown some ability to post up and get on the offensive glass, which is more in line with how UNC has played under Smith and Williams. Davis, as the all-time leader in three-point percentage at North Carolina, understands the need to bring in more shooters, as Kerwin Walton right now is the only returning wing player who is a legitimate three-point shooter. He stressed that in his same introductory press conference. The Heels were 268th in the nation, hitting a little under 32% of their threes. It'll be interesting to see if Davis employs some four-out offensive sets along with some of that old Carolina break, which in theory might produce some cleaner looks for players like Love Walton and RJ Davis. Cupboard's not bare, but it isn't stocked to overflowing as we've come to expect from one of college basketball's bluest of blue blood programs. Returning North Carolina to that level and keeping them there consistently will not be an easy job. And maybe Williams stepped down because he no longer had the energy to try. But Hubert Davis will be given every opportunity to do it. He checks all the boxes for what you want in a head coach in this day and age, but he also bleeds Tar Heel blue. And at Chapel Hill, that is no small thing.
I'm going to go many different ways. I want to kind of discuss with you in a second about hiring from within, but I wanted to look at the updating of the list of college basketball coaching changes, and it's all over the board this year on the type of people that have been hired. Like Hubert Davis, they're hiring from within, and with a guy who's never really coached before, but has had time on the bench. Hofstra, my alma mater, has actually gone with Speedy Claxton, probably one of the all-time greats there, as their head coach. There's other ways, like in the failed coaching category that you were talking about, Richard Pitino went to New Mexico. And I'm trying to think of the other person that I was thinking of. Shaka Smart, who is kind of failing in Texas, went to Marquette. There are people who have been gone from little schools to bigger schools. Wes Miller went to Cincinnati after his time winning in UNC Greensboro. And my favorite hire, Porter Moser, getting a chance at a big school in Oklahoma. And then, obviously, those places actually promoted from within for their new head coaches. Right. Texas Tech is also one. Chris Beard moved over to Texas. Texas Tech promoted from within. So one of the things that has been very interesting this year is the all over the board really coaching hires. And you know what? That is actual new blood. And then don't forget Mike Woodson going from the Knicks to Indiana, a guy who's never had real college coaching experience. That's going to be a history in itself because they were looking for Brad Stevens.
Right. Well, to me, that's Indiana looking to replicate what Juwan Howard did in Michigan. You get a guy who's had success at the NBA level, both as a player and as a coach, and is an alma mater, graduated from that university, understands what it means to be at that university and everything that goes along with the history, the tradition, what it means. And you're putting him in a position to say, okay, the guy may not have college basketball coaching experience, but he has plenty of NBA coaching experience. Why can't he do here what Juwan Howard did at his alma mater?
And let's not forget about Arizona going to Tommy Lloyd of Gonzaga to fill in their head spot. Okay. There's two things I want to talk to you about before we get to our final segment. Number one is the small thing, and that's the UNC connection. Hubert Davis has almost said, I want to hire an all UNC staff. Right move, you think, or you think it's a move that's going to backfire?
No, I don't, because the way that works is there's a lot of guys who he has access to. Sean May was part of Williams' coaching staff,
and was an MOP of the Final Four also, so he has UNC history.
And the way I look at it is this: if you're tasked with returning UNC to its previous level of prominence, you need to be surrounded by guys who understand what that program means. Your assistants are going to be the guys who are going to be going out and recruiting. These are the guys who also then have to get the guys that they bring in to buy into the Carolina way. And there is very much a Carolina way, even if Davis tweaks it to a certain extent, the way Williams tweaked it to a certain extent. Williams did not run the exact carbon/Xerox copy of what Dean Smith ran. Times changed, athletes got bigger, stronger, faster. You adjust a little bit. So I think that having a plethora of guys with UNC connections around him on that bench does not hurt. The one thing that I think he does need to do is the key hire for Davis will be his lead assistant. Or his, if you want to, maybe not his lead, but like his consigliere, kind of like how Juwan Howard hired Phil Martelli.
By the way, consigliere being in the show today is a plus. Kudos to you for using that expansive vocabulary.
There we go. And I think that was a very key hire, even though a lot of people, don't look at Martelli as like maybe the lead assistant, but he's the guy. Remember, when Howard got ejected, Martelli's the guy who took over. Why? Because Martelli's the guy with the most head coaching experience. Hubert Davis needs to get someone like that to sit on the bench with him, someone who's been in the college game for decades. If there's somebody who has a connection to North Carolina that can fill that role, great. If not, then that's a situation where I can understand going outside the family to fill that role. But he definitely needs to fill that. He needs to have someone like that at his side as he gets himself up and running, considering this is his first chance being the head man. I think that is going to be a key hire. And like I said, if they can do it from someone who has coaching ties to North Carolina, great. If not, get someone who's a big enough name, maybe who's done this before elsewhere. If he can find a Phil Martelli type, I think that'll be a great start for him.
Jeff Lebo might be another start for him. That might be a good choice. He's rumored to be in that position, but like you said, Sean May is the only one who's been hired. One more thing, the NCAA has officially lifted the 1-year ban for the transfer portal. This has been a game changer, and I'm just curious, do you think this is going to be the new recruiting season? The transfer portal has been making news over the last few years in both college football and college basketball. Most specifically, Joe Burrow was a part of that transfer portal and now is going to be was a Heisman winner and is going to be a multi-million-dollar quarterback in the NFL because of his time at LSU. What do you think about this rule kind of being lifted? And I know you had made this a topic of the show, but now I'm just like, this is actually something we should talk about first.
Well, here's the thing. I have long raged against the fact that millionaire coaches can come and go program to program whenever they want, but the guys they've recruited are stuck there. And you and I both know that a lot of guys go to a specific school to play for a specific coach. And if that coach leaves, why should they have to stay? It has long been past the time where, you were, the only way you could do that was if you had a year of eligibility and you used it as your graduate year, which enabled you to go anywhere and play immediately. I'm sorry, if the transfer portal this rule is big, and a lot of people are wailing, going, oh my God, it's going to be like free agency. Maybe yes, maybe no.
Good.
You and I both know that sometimes when a head coach leaves, guys open their recruiting all the time. So why do I, if regular students can transfer from one school to another for whatever reason, why are college athletes constantly in the ways of the rest of the college student population treated like second-class citizens or treated like, indentured servants, for lack of a better phrase? So to me, I applaud the NCAA doing this because it's long been since past the time where this should have been an avenue that any college athlete could employ to improve their situation. Are we going to get a mass exodus like the Jews leaving Egypt? Back in the day with Moses leading them. No, these guys are going to go. Some of them will, some of them won't. I know it may have been a stretch on the.
Yeah, I think it was, but that's.
I was looking for something to explain an exodus. So give me a break. It's Saturday morning. I haven't had coffee yet. But you know where I was going with that. People, the hand wringing about, oh my God, everybody's gonna leave. No, not everybody is going to leave, because you know what? In certain situations, especially if you. The number two, in that coaching staff gets promoted, he has the connection with those same players because he's had them for at least a year. So maybe he'll be able to keep them there. Is it always going to happen? No, but you know what? If the coaches have unilateral ability to move wherever the hell they want, whenever the hell they want. I'm sorry. College athletes are coming to school, yes, ostensibly to get an education, but college athletes are looking to play for someone who they feel can get them to the next level. If that guy leaves, I can't blame them for wanting to find a better situation if they don't think the person stepping in to that head coaching slot can do that for them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The amateur athlete, that's garbage. Let's stop with that already.
Well, we know how much
college football has long been a ridiculously large business.
Shay, we know how much bullshit that is, and I think
Yes.
we've kind of went ad nauseum about this. This is going to be a huge change, and we'll get to the final segment in just a second. This is going to be a huge change for two reasons. And Nick Saban has said we're going to take advantage of this rule as much as possible, which you should. Number one, you're going to see big athletes going to little schools because they're not getting enough playing time at their big school, and that's amazing because you're going to get some mid-major love, especially in basketball. Football is a little bit different because there's not really a lot of mid-majors. Once you're outside of the Power Five, I hate to say no one really cares, but no one really cares. So that's going to be something huge in college. Yeah, that's going to help huge in that extent. In college football, it's going to be the exact opposite. Think of Cam Newton leaving from a JUCO college to go to what was going to be Florida, but ended up being Auburn. You're going to see a lot of people going from smaller mid-major schools to big major schools. And you know what? As much as I want a balanced college football where it has a lot of parity, let's be honest with you. There's 12 teams that are really the driving force in college football, and that's perfectly fine. That's acceptable, and we know that. There might be one team that surprises, but the way that's going to happen is going to make college football and college basketball a lot more fun for years to come.
Oh yeah, I mean, Rabbi, you brought up the football side. I mean, I was focusing morely on the basketball side when we first started, but on the football side, if you think about quarterback situations at a lot of Power 5 schools, if a guy, based on who's in front of him and who's being brought in, if he doesn't think he's going to get a shot to get the starting job in his 4 years there, why shouldn't he take advantage of the transfer portal and go to a team that, even if it maybe is even if it's in the same conference, but maybe a step down, so to speak, but it gives him an opportunity to step in and be a starting quarterback and get game film because he thinks he has a chance to go to the next level. Again, why not?
The only downside to this whole thing is it could make quarterbacks much more susceptible to leaving the moment they get benched. I know a situation, I think the situation in Clemson last year was a huge example once Trevor Lawrence took over for the starting job in his freshman year. I don't remember the person who was
Philip Franks.
That's another big situation right there. But we'll talk more about that as we get closer to college football season. But Jay, college basketball's done, right?
Yeah, it is. It seems like forever ago, but it was only about 2 weeks. And Rabbi, you know how much I love the madness. So I thought it'd be a good idea that we close out this morning's show with a look back at how this year's NCAA tournament was handled in the midst of the still ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Props on getting your first shot, by the way. That we even got to the Gonzaga-Baylor finals matchup, which we all wanted to see ever since those two teams had to cancel their regular season game, was a feat unto itself. And let's give some props and some love to the Bears for spoiling what would have been a historic end to the season for the Zags with a very convincing 86-70 win back on April 5th. But to me, Rabbi, the real feat was how the state of Indiana and the city of Indianapolis specifically pulled off this tournament with only one game out of the 68 falling victim to the no contest rule, where a team with a positive COVID test was not allowed to play and their opponent moved on to the next round. Rabbi, a lot of new and different things happened with this year's tournament. Even if next year's tournament is not played under the COVID cloud, what from this year's tournament do you want to see continue going forward?
And let's give a shout out to our third man in the group, Anthony, who is recovering from symptoms of COVID-19. Yes. We'll see him back on the draft show along with
I'm channeling my Anthony. Anthony is usually the one with culturally up to date shirts and for icons of phenomenons. I'm sporting a little Game of Thrones today. It's the 10th anniversary.
He would probably be wearing a Mets jersey here, but the Mets have played so little games. But the Mets have played so little games that I think it would be nice for someone
coming right now.
But the Yankees want winter to be coming, but that's a
fair
whole
enough.
other show.
It's the 10th anniversary of Game of Thrones, hence my donning it for today's show.
I see that. Now let's talk about the madness a little bit. I love the fact that everybody played under a bubble. I think playing everything in one centralized location made everything almost a little bit special. Everybody is in close proximity. You can actually play with the schedules a little bit. And I know we saw some damn good basketball. Yes, I mean, how about the run from UCLA? I don't know if UCLA would have done the same thing if they were traveling from the West to the East. I think it would have been home court advantage is pretty much taken off of the table. And it was one of the most exciting tournaments that we've seen in a while. We got one of the possibly the most iconic moments in college basketball history with the Gonzaga Jalen Suggs buzzer beater in overtime against UCLA in the national semifinal. I think this is going to be, first of all, I'm going to take one part of that introduction and kind of dissect it. I think at least for next year, the games are still going to be played under a COVID cloud. Not even half of the population is fully vaccinated yet. Right. Sure, we might have herd immunity in 2022, but COVID is not a thing that goes away immediately. There's still going to be cases out there. It's still going to be out there. And also, just remember, your shots may only last for a year, so you're going to have to get vaccinated again. And there's also strains out there that have been pretty contagious, like all diseases that happens from time to time. So a COVID cloud is not going away in 2022. It's still going to be here, maybe just a little less. So I would like at least one more year of the centralized location. Maybe let's do it in New York. Maybe let's do it in California. Maybe let's do it in Texas and then bring the women up to Indiana next year. I think that is something that can and should be done. I think one of the interesting things of the Final Four is having everything in a dome, but half of a dome, and it was still intriguing to me. Now, the one thing that kind of sucked, and I'll say it right there, is when that Jalen Suggs buzzer beater happened, it was a tepid crowd reaction because it was really only a crowd of about 5,000 to 10,000 people instead what could have been a crowd that would have been going insane with 40,000 to 50,000 people. I think one thing that you can get with a centralized location is you can bring a lot of economy to one city, one area, and you can get that whole Indianapolis crowd, which is so basketball heavy already, really, really exciting. And as you're going to be talking about in a second, you saw tournament games in places that you never would have seen before. And that just made what we saw in March, and of course the beginning of April, which is still part of March Madness, and I still have no idea why it's called that way. But I think what we saw was honestly something unique. Yeah, it was something unique, and I love uniqueness. I love seeing things that I haven't seen before, Chad.
Fair enough. For me, I kind of like having the entire being played all on the same day. When you have the games being played concurrently back to back on a single day, you get that March Madness Day 1 feel, which gets fans into the mood. Now maybe this year's first four felt more like the rest of the tournament due to UCLA playing Michigan State in one of the first four games. And granted, there's no guarantee we'll get historic programs like that in one of those 11-seed playing games, but it still makes the first four better in my mind by having all the games on a single day. Now, look, as much as I love March Madness, I tend to ignore the first four because most of the matchups don't interest me, and I'm looking forward to the actual start of the madness. For me, the first four was just a thing that made it impossible for me to complete my brackets early because I had to wait to see who came out of those number 11 seed playing games.
Well, yeah, but that's something I do all the time, though. You have to submit your bracket that day. By the way, my bracket was horrible, so I'll just go with what you do next time.
And we all know nobody ever picks the 16 playing winners to advance because they wind up playing the top two number 1 seeds. Now, look, if you go this way, that might mean that Dayton, which is the long time site of the first four, maybe they don't get all four of the games. But that shouldn't stop Dan Gavitt and company from keeping this structure going forward, especially if what we get in return is a more exciting start to the best 3 weeks in sports. After all, 3 of this year's first four games were decided by one possession or went into overtime, and that's very March Madness. The other thing that we had this year that I wouldn't mind seeing going forward is something you alluded to, Rabbi, is more tournament games being played in historic college hoop venues. It was pretty cool seeing March Madness games played at Butler University's Hinkle Fieldhouse, where Hoosiers was filmed. I know the tournament committee likes having the atmosphere of the big football stadiums and that a lot of the games get played in, especially the Final Four. And I'm not saying we should stop that, but don't tell me they can't find a way to have some more first and second round games played at places like the Palestra in Philly, Allen Fieldhouse in Kansas, Cameron Indoor Stadium in Durham, Dean Smith Center in Chapel Hill, Pauley Pavilion in LA, or Rupp Arena in Kentucky.
Well, let's stop there. Rupp Arena has always been a site that has been used over the years, even in the modern era. So Rupp is kind of out because
I want more.
You want more? You can get more. I'm perfectly fine with that.
The committee finally, recently allowed games to be played at the mecca of basketball, Madison Square Garden in New York City. So why not keep that going? There is so much history associated with college basketball. We should celebrate that when the games are being played on the sport's biggest stage.
Yeah, I think one thing that has been interesting, and I think they used to do it kind of in the early 90s, is they've also played games. They actually have played games at Mackey Arena a bunch of times before this year. They play games at Utah's campus. They play games in a famous place in New Mexico that no one remembers anymore called the Pit. Yeah, well, we're built of a different cloth in that situation.
We are.
But I that's going to be something I think that sticks around. College basketball has actually gone away from doing big stadiums for regional sites, which has been helpful. And they've gone to kind of more NBA-ish sites like the FedEx Forum, like, as you mentioned, MSG, which they finally got back in the good graces of the NCAA for after God knows how long, and Staples Center, which has always been a very popular site in the 2010s. But one thing that I did not like about this tournament, and then I'm going to be negative for you, I know, shocker. I kind of want to go back to the Thursday through Saturday format this year. It was kind of weird. Yeah. It was kind of weird seeing those second round games on a Monday. I don't know if I like that as much as I should, because you saw a very, like, Kansas USC, great game, ended up being a blowout, and I don't know how many people actually saw that. The Elite Games being on a Monday, Tuesday, I think kind of tired people out. That needs to go. I think the ratings were really good for the Sweet 16 games, and it helped that each game was standalone. Yeah. Although, if you want to see that Loyola of Illinois, Oregon State slogfest again, and not have anything to actually change to, that kind of might be a negative. But I think that going back to the original schedule of Thursday through Saturday is probably going to happen.
Yeah.
But who the hell knows? I think the NCAA, and honestly, all professional sports, we are kind of making it up as we go along. I think COVID has made people kind of adjust everything to different schedules. Luckily for the NBA, COVID hasn't been as much of an issue, knock on wood, in the second half of the season. The only thing that really has delayed games is the unfortunate events in Minneapolis over the week. But just ask the NHL. With the Vancouver Canucks, how everything has to be kind of put on a different plane because of COVID.
True, and here's the other thing I hope that we can take away and from this year's tournament is that going forward, let's hope the NCAA doesn't shoot itself in the foot like with the way they treated the women in San Antonio. Women's basketball, college basketball has grown in leaps and bounds over the last decade, 2 decades, to where it is almost as much of a moneymaker as the men's tournament. And to the way they kind of did a lot of things as an afterthought during that women's tournament. I don't want to get, if you want to get too deep into it, go ahead. I'm just going to I'm going to headline it for you. To me, Mark Emmert's response to what happened in San Antonio was wishy-washy and lame. And a lot of people in the sport don't have a lot of respect for him and don't believe he's any type of a leader. So whether it's him or someone else down the road, the women deserve a lot more respect than what I saw them given in terms of the off the court stuff in San Antonio. And that hopefully COVID, no COVID, hopefully we don't ever see that nonsense again.
And before we go, mentioning the Arizona Wildcats, the women's basketball team that made the
Congrats.
national final. Congratulations. And then congratulations to the NCAA, because before the national semifinals played, there was a hype video that included everybody but the Arizona Wildcats, because they were a 3 seed and weren't as big of a name. And they said a literal to the NCAA by beating UConn in their national semifinal. That era was so egregious. I love UConn. I have friends who went to UConn. It made me kind of root for Arizona in that game. And they gave the literal, again, to the NCAA. And
yeah, and you know what, Rabbi, as much as, I'm sad that we won't get to see 3 more years of Jalen Suggs at Gonzaga and what he might possibly have been able to do staying at that program, I am happy we are going to see his BFF get 3 more years out of UConn and Paige Beckers. So, happy about that.
All right. Jay, I think we're done.
Yeah, I think that about wraps it up. He's Steve. I'm Jay. This is On the Sports Lines. And if you had as much fun watching it as we did doing it, then come back and see us on April 29th when we'll be live for the entire first round of the 2021 NFL Draft with our pals Anthony Strait and Joe Tafaro. Live streaming just about every week via facebook.com/onthesportslines. You can rewatch this show or check up any of the ones you may have missed at our youtube.com/onthesportslines channel. And you can follow us on Twitter at ONTH Sportslines, where the link to this show will be found either later today or tomorrow. Either way, check it out. For Steve and all of us at On the Sports Lines, good night, good morning, good afternoon.
And good night.